Good afternoon, and welcome to the conversation that we're going to have around this important topic that everyone's discussing in every boardroom around the world today, which is how do you build a trustworthy and safe AI framework in this rapidly evolving technological world where things change from day to day, whether they're regulations or the technology itself, whether you're worried about certain risks or other things, everything changes every day. My name is Jennifer Yokoyama. I'm a Senior Vice President and Deputy General Counsel at Cisco. I lead the Legal Innovation Strategy and Technology team, where we cover IP, everything from patents and copyrights, trade secrets, and trademarks. I also lead the open source team, but importantly to this conversation, I lead the AI governance, AI procurement, and the team that provides the legal support for the AI strategy and data strategy for the company. I also work very closely with the Outshift and DevNet teams. And joining me today is Vijay Pandey, the General Manager and Senior Vice President of Outshift for Cisco.
Thank you, Jen. And just to introduce myself, like Jen said, I run Outshift. It's an internal incubator at Cisco. It's the incubation engine for Cisco. We look at problem spaces and ventures that take Cisco into adjacent markets. And we ideate all the way from idea to market reality. So that's what we do. We also have DevNet, Cisco Research, open source as part of the umbrella. And because of those reasons, the fact that we are heading into new territory all the time, Jen and I are closely working together to make sure that we do things in the right way possible.
And Vijay is the executive sponsor of our Responsible AI Committee at Cisco, an integral part of AI governance, and we co-lead that group and have watched the evolution of that committee as a guardrail and a safeguard around how we make sure that we are confident that we are producing and deploying safe and trustworthy AI. So Vijay, I'd love to talk to you about what you've seen over the last couple years in this space technologically. How has it evolved? And what does that mean when it comes to challenges around AI governance?
Yeah, so I think we all know, we've been part of this journey. The word cloud that you see here is something that we've all been focused on right from the get-go, since the time we've been leveraging data, since the time we've been building AI. And that journey has been only increasing and rapidly accelerating, rather. And so if you go to the next slide, one of the things that we've been seeing is we've been building ML and AI for a long time now. And this started back in the 60s. You had rule-based systems. You had neural networks that were coined back in the 60s. And from then on, till the current present day, the core pieces of technologies behind what we use and love every day in terms of AI have been gradually maturing. So we've gone from expert systems and rule-based systems to we've gone from neural networks to transformers. We had the ChatGPT moment back in November of 22. And all this is great till we started building these simple assistants and simple agents. And this entire journey has been filled with potholes that we've had to navigate when it comes to how we handle data, how we look at governance, responsible AI, and so forth. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next few minutes. But the key thing to note here is, as you bring this forward, we are just at the starting point. So even though we feel that there is a lot happening, a lot more is going to happen, and it's going to happen at a pretty rapid pace. So what we've been building so far are simple assistants, simple agents. These are things that suggest decisions to you. They might take some simple actions, but they are pretty small and limited in nature. What we're seeing going forward is all of human work is going to get disrupted. So whether you talk about business processes and business software, that's going to get agentic. Whether you talk about consumer software, that's going to get agentic. Social software, the way you interact with avatars on social networks, that's going to get agentic. The way you discover drugs and new materials is going to get agentic. The way you clean your house and the way you put things on the shelf is going to get agentic as well through robotics. So there are going to be agents everywhere, and these agents will need to come together and collaborate and solve these massive challenges for you. And if you thought that things were complicated right now, things are going to get really, really, really complicated.
And really, really fast.
And really, really fast.
That's the key.
Yes. So the one thing that we wanted to do is step back a little bit and think about this and just ask you, Jen, I mean, you've been talking to a whole bunch of customers as well. We are a big enterprise customer in our own right.
Correct.
We've been seeing this journey. Do people even see this journey coming at them, the wave coming at them? And are they prepared to even tackle this?
Well, I think they see the journey, they see the wave coming. I think as they see it coming, they don't feel ready for it. And so the AI Readiness Index that we ran just this last year says that 98%, so that's basically every enterprise customer that we surveyed, feels the urgency to deliver on AI. We heard at the keynote that it's not about advancing and becoming more competitive. It's about not seeing the negative effects of not adopting AI. So everyone knows that they have to deliver and deploy and use and figure out how to get returns on AI. But only 13% of those surveyed say that they feel like they're ready to do this. And to put it in another language, the way Oliver said it, this is horrible. This is a horrible statistic. I think the statistic he pushed up was only 7% in Europe feel ready to do so. So what does that mean? I think there's a way to look at that pessimistically, but when you come from it from my perspective, which is someone who's been doing this for years, I was at Microsoft when they launched GitHub Copilot. I was in charge of the product team that did that on the legal side, also the Azure OpenAI product. And so we've seen from the beginning, you can do this right, but you have to design and build with these things in mind, and that's how you get ready. What I see this number is that people now are more aware of how complex and how hard it is to be ready. I don't think anyone's less ready this year than they were last year. I think they realize that there's more to do and it's more complex than they thought it was. And so to me, this gives me optimism that these boardroom conversations, the enterprise conversations with executives, they realize that when they talk about putting together AI governance, that becomes part of the consideration for investment. So everyone talks about tens of billions of dollars of investment in AI. They talk about GPUs and power and all the resources you need for that. I think people are now realizing governance is part of that. You need to have the skilled people to put in place the governance. You need to have the processes and the support from the ground up and the top down to really put those protocols in place, risk assessments, have the conversations with your vendors and the model providers to make sure you understand what's going in the AI so that you can be confident of the guardrails you need to put in on top of it for your customers. You need to have the people in place with the skills to help you understand what AI you need for your purpose. You don't need a Ferrari to drive down the street to get groceries when a Honda will do. You want to make sure you're using the right AA for the right purpose. And I think the point here is that it's really, really complex and difficult because unlike other software and coding, we've talked about this, once you have the AI purpose in place and you start building, you can't just patch it if something's wrong. You can't patch it if you got something wrong. You'd have to start over to get it right. That is an enormous resource. It's a resource and time we just don't have. So some other statistics, that I think this is not as optimistic in my opinion. Only 1 in 3 organizations have comprehensive AI policies and protocols in place. These are the foundation for making sure that your governance framework is going to lead to trustworthy and safe AI. One of the things that we've done here at Cisco from the get-go, over 2 years ago, was put in place our responsible AI principles. That guides all of the things that Vijay and I talk about with this RAI committee. It guides how we put our protocols and practices in place. Are they transparent? Is it accountable? Are they fair? Have we thought about security? Is it reliable? Is it private? Underneath all this is data. All that has to still be protected the same way it was before the boom of generative AI and all of these assistants and now agents that are coming. So this next slide really shows kind of the key from Cisco's point of view and how we built it. The way I like to think about it is, for those of you who don't live in places where there's earthquakes, I apologize, but in California where I grew up, earthquake-proof buildings are a big deal. And what's key is the foundation underneath is what keeps it solid. The building is built, the architecture to sway, and you may feel all the chaos when you're up on the 20th, 30th floor and you feel like it's about to fall apart, but the foundation is solid. That foundation in an AI space is the principles and policies you lay out. The three things above it are the things that we're faced with. More automation, more transformation, more risk, more regulations. How are you building your foundation to adapt and allow those things to sway but never break and still make sure you have trustworthy and safe AI? One of those examples that we put in place is we do AI impact assessments, and we looked at them at the very beginning for a use case perspective. So every use case had to be run through these assessments. And then we realized we need to adapt because what we need to know is what's in the model. So we built on model assessments. That now informs the use case assessments, and it gives us this extra level of transparency. And then we said, but you know what matters also are the vendors. So we had to add on vendor assessments, which allow us to ask these questions of vendors. Are they the trusted partners? Are they offering what we need? Are they transparent with where their data is going, how they're handling your data, where it's being processed, where it's being stored?
I need to interrupt you for a
yeah,
second.
no, please do.
I think so. So if you think about the way this wave is coming, right? I mean, so Jen is talking about things that you both build internally in the organization, as well as objects and assets that you consume from somebody else. What's going to happen, and you saw that in the first slide, that journey that we are on is every piece of work that humans do is going to be agentic in nature, which means that you will not know whether a piece of software or hardware that you're consuming inside your organization is actually agentic and how it was built. So it throws a little bit of a wrench into the equation. What it also does is, since every piece of software or hardware might contain agentic code, how do you even keep up with the scale through all of this? And how do you make sure that it's part of the bone marrow of the system, or the skeleton of the system, so that you're not thinking about it as you go along? And so what we've done, and we've been on this journey for a long time, since 2012, but back in 22, we had our first responsible AI framework, and we've been evolving it as the technology has evolved. So one of the things I want to throw back at you, Jen, is as we've scaled and as you've seen yourself, the funnel of assessment requests coming in and just exploding. I mean, we've had those conversations where it's like, we are 6 months into the backlog and things are just looking terrible. How do you scale out? And you guys put together a pretty good framework around it.
Right.
So if you can just talk through the filtering mechanism.
Right, so we scaled, it was very much a risk-based approach. So you scale to say, what are the actual high-risk, like not light touch, white glove services you need to work with the engineers on to make sure that they're building it appropriately. But you need to know how to filter out the lower risk, the internal chatbots that are just helping with FAQs. And you know that they're working with and on models that are approved and vetted, and they're safe, and they're secure within the databases and within the structures that you put together. And so having that view to be able to filter through, identify lower risk use cases, push them through quickly so that we could actually pay attention to the higher risk ones that need more help and need more expertise in building and making sure we get them right so we don't have to start back over, allowed us to get through more assessments faster, but also pay more attention to the ones that needed more attention and more work with the engineers. And that's why it's so great at Cisco. We have this wonderful collaboration between the governance teams and the engineering teams, and the RAI committee is a perfect example of that. It's where Vijay and I got to know each other, and we have evolved.
And so we look like friends, but the reality is that mostly engineering and product people look at legal and governance and say, friction, 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 and it's like, there's resistance.
I'm not super popular.
And so, this is a question back to you. I don't know how many people here develop products versus deploy products, or looking at governance as a whole. But one of the things that we realized is that governance doesn't need to be an anchor. It can be an enabler. And how do we make that happen, Jen? And we've actually made that happen inside the company. So if you can just shed a little bit of light on that.
I mean, I think leadership like yourself, everyone on the ELT talks about how important it is and why it's so important to get this right from the beginning. Being able to have these conversations early on and making sure that there is a very clear guideline and guidance around how that's supposed to work. But importantly, showing results. Here's how much better our product, here are the differentiators that we have, because we can talk about transparently what we're doing with AI, what's going into the models, how we're using it. We can answer questions if we do this right on transparency and accountability for our customers that want to work with us because they know what we're doing with AI. They aren't getting questions or contract clauses that are so hard to work through because we're not able to give them information that they need in order to be confident in their systems and their uses of AI. And so that's really the transformation we've had. So I'd ask you, I'll throw it back to you, like, what have you seen as far as the game-changing types of discussions and collaborations you've had in this space with your teams and where we're going?
Yeah, I think so. The thing to keep in mind here is, so any of you, I mean, if I told you that I have a killer app that cures cancer, and if you just download it tomorrow, you'll be like cancer-free. Not that you have cancer, but let's say anybody in your circle will be the healthiest forever, right? You would download it, but then if I told you, hey, it's insecure, there's a big Trojan horse, there's a big bug in there, they'll just go ahead and steal all of your credit card information, would you download that piece of app? No. Right? So even though the value might look incredible, the fact that it's insecure and there's a Trojan horse in there, you're not going to pick that app. And so an insecure app is not a usable app. Mm-hmm. And so what makes you think that an irresponsible app or an application that is built on non-responsible AI frameworks and non-governed, why should you use that? It's the same thing. I mean, so that's at least the mantra that we believe in inside of Cisco. That's something that all of you should think about. So to us, the big question is, if you believe in that thesis, do you catch that thesis when you are about to ship a product? Do you catch that thesis when it's already shipped to customers? Or do you catch it at day zero? And so when we think about bugs, we think about it in a similar way, where the cost of a bug increases over time. It's the cheapest to solve a bug at day zero is the most expensive to solve a bug in a customer environment. Similarly, with responsible AI and governance, let's make sure that it's put together the right way right from the get-go, because to fix it when you are shipping it or to fix it when it's actually shipped in production is just going to be a nightmare. So if you think of those things, then we all line up and we say, yes, we have to go through this. The other thing I would say is it needs to be built into the fabric of development or in the fabric of deployment. So if you're deploying applications, if you're developing applications, just like security, just like scale, if you make sure that these governance practices are a part of your tool chain, then it's automatic. You don't think about it. So pushing some learnings all the way down to the individuals in the organization, we've done a lot of work there, making sure that it's part of the tool chain before shipping a product and making sure it's automatic are some of the ways that we reduce friction between the two teams, and we both are responsible for doing that.
Right.
And that's how we counter it.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't address the regulatory environment. We're in Europe, where I think people see it as more heavily regulated. They have the EU AI Act, which is the first real governance act in regulations, and it's still forming, but it's really a risk-based approach, right? Like, are you high risk? You have many more requirements. What are you doing with it? They've put banned uses like, I forgot. Anyway, they banned the uses like surveillance and also social scoring. And so you can't do those types of things in Europe. And then yesterday at the AI Summit, you heard potentially Vice President of the US, Vance, talk about the need to deregulate, actually encouraging other countries to deregulate. My point is, we don't know where this is going. And I would argue that if there is more deregulation, it actually is more incumbent on companies to do the trustworthy work, to do the groundwork so that your customers trust you. Because Vijay and I were talking about this. If your customers don't trust you, they're not going to buy it, regardless of whether there's a regulation. If it's going to spit out bad information or unreliable information, who's going to want that? You want to work with people. I think it's more incumbent now to make sure that the companies are doing the right thing to create responsible AI. And the fact of the matter is, tomorrow, this may change. You never know who's adopting what when, and as a responsible company who has customers that rely on you, we're part of critical infrastructure, you've got to get this right. There is so much promise and opportunity in AI, and everyone talks about the upside, but there's also so much risk. If we get this right, we can unlock that potential and not have to constantly worry about all of the parade of horribles, but we have to get it right now, and we have to build it in, not bolt it on. That's why this is a journey, and you need to be resilient. But I want to talk to you a little bit about this move to autonomous agent.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that we've been doing is, again, as the journey, agentic competition journey is evolving, and as software is becoming more autonomous and is taking action on your behalf, we are moving from systems that are deterministic to systems that are non-deterministic and are probabilistic in nature. So they will come back with outcomes that are 90% confidence and 95% confidence, sometimes even 80% confident. That's one aspect. The other aspect is, instead of suggesting an action, they are actually taking action. And they're taking action at machine scale. So like at scales that humans can't just interrupt and say, oh, we have humans in the loop and we can prevent that from happening. So when all of that is happening and you are worried about responsible AI, safety and security and trust, how do you even deal with it? So some of the learnings that we've gone through as an industry with the autonomous cars and autonomous vehicles industry, we've tried to map those learnings to agentic software, and that's the table that you see behind me. I'm not going to run through the table. Just one thing to know is level 0 for us is like, we don't mess around with customer data. So that is like ground truth. That's not even part of the table. I mean, that's like ground truth. I just put it up there. But literally what we're looking at is level 1 to level 5 autonomy, just the way we looked at autonomous vehicles and their autonomy from level 1 to level 5. So what you see in the second column is agentic autonomy, and in the third column is the mapping to autonomous vehicles. So as you go from level 1 to level 5, there's more probabilistic nature of the system that's coming up, and there's more agency and autonomy that's coming up. So level 1 is the most deterministic, the least autonomy. Level 5 is the most probabilistic and the most autonomy. And so as you go down that table, you get more sort of unknowns. And so as the autonomy increases and as the probabilistic nature increases, you need to make sure that the governance needs to increase. So this is a table that we've built through the learnings that we've had, and what we're trying to do is encode it, codify it into systems that we are building. So one thesis that we are actually out there trying to push and trying to build and ship is this whole thesis of the Internet of Agents. Think of it as a platform that allows for agentic software in various shapes and forms to come together, collaborate, and solve for bigger problems. And so in that platform, in that Internet of Agents, we will ensure that this table, this governance mechanism is automatically built in, so that as you go from level 1 to level 5, that governance framework is automatically taken care of. And you're not dealing with human scale trustworthiness when agents are operating at machine scale.
Yeah, and we have the conversation early on. What do you need in those guardrails? What level are you at? What type of technical controls can you put in there? What fail-safes do you need to have in there? When do you need to say a human does need to be in the loop here? When do you need to say you can recommend but don't act? Like, where are those ethical and responsible and safety and security guardrails that need to be built into this framework? Because this is coming. I think one of the things that we hear often is this is all about data, and we've got GDPR and all these privacy rules. And if you think about it, they are analogous. But GDPR and the privacy rules, they dealt with one specific part of data, just PII, personally identifiable information. And now we're talking about all data. Data is data is data, and all of that has to be managed, and you have to understand where it's going, how it's going, who's looking at it, who's not, how you're using it. And as you move down these levels, there's less touch. That's the whole point of AI, less human touch along the way. But a human has to be working with the engineers to figure out what does your framework look like? Where are you on this level? How can you build it in? How can you have AI work for you, not only for what you want to do in productivity, but also for how you want to govern it? How can you have AI govern itself and help create these rules while you have human interaction? I think super importantly, transparently, you can see what these agents are doing along the way, so you can stop it and change it and help inform it as you're building these guardrails. It's really exciting, but it's going to happen really fast. GDPR, we had years and years to build out the compliance frameworks in our departments to make sure we were following the laws and making sure we were properly accounting for personally identifiable information. We don't have years. Everyone's pushing this, everyone's pushing it now, and speed is of the essence, but you will not be able to go fast in the way you need to if you do not have a proper governance framework in place from the beginning, and that you follow it all the way through and continue to monitor it. And you can do that through AI, you can do that with human intervention, but that's why those principles, transparency, accountability, and security, those are so important every step of the way so that you know what's happening. You can tell your customers what's happening when they ask. If you're working with a vendor that can't tell you what they're doing, maybe that's not the right vendor for you. Do you want to work with DeepSeek that has 100% vulnerability, jailbreak hits? I don't know what you're using your systems for, but those are things you need to know, and it helps to have those conversations with your vendors. They may not be prepared to do that, but it helps you understand that you're building the right framework.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, like, again, agents are supposed to mimic human beings. And so the one question we always talk about is, are we trusting AI and are we trusting agents? And that's what we've been talking about. But what's going to happen is that these ensembles of agents are going to come together and collaborate. So are AI agents going to trust other AI agents is the other big thing that we need to keep in mind. And it's all going to be an automated process. So building the right frameworks, that's one thing, but building it in an open way is the other big one, because you need to build frameworks that are open, trustworthy, explainable, and transparent, like Jen was saying. And it's built into the fabric because these AI agents will talk to each other and will need to trust each other, and we'll need to figure out who to trust and who not to be able to proceed forward.
And if you have a consistent understanding of what that looks like, then you can build your agents that know which ones they can trust, because there are certain parameters to look for, right? And so if that becomes the model, then you don't have to worry about your agent potentially working with an untrustworthy agent because they haven't followed or answered the questions that you're asking. So
it's been great. I mean, I think one thing that we've been doing is we've been working on a whole bunch of these problem statements, both around how agents are being formed, the kinds of autonomy that they might have, the safety, the guardrails, the security aspects of it. We've been driving towards this whole Internet of Agents, which is a platform that allows for agent-to-agent communication, collaboration. A lot of detail behind this framework and how it ties into the governance framework inside of Cisco. All of that, if you can go to the next slide, you can read all about that at the Outshift blog. There's a bunch of papers out there and blogs. And if you want to talk a lot more and help us actually move these frameworks forward, because we need all of your help in doing this, please come and talk to both Jen and I, and send us an email or get in touch with us. Any last thoughts, Jen?
I mean, my last thought is just, I am incredibly optimistic about this. I think we are at a point in history where we can be on the right side of it or the wrong side. And I think the key to being on the right side is really making sure intentionally we are building in responsible AI from the beginning. And that takes collaboration across every company and across every organization within those companies. And these conversations are so incredibly important. And just understanding how this work actually helps you speed up and adopt and deploy AI the way you need to get to ROI that I'm sure your boss and your CEO and your CFO are asking for yesterday. This will help you get there faster than if you just haphazardly do it and find out later you made a big mistake and you've spent billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars that you can't recoup because you have to start over, because that's how AI works. It's so important. So thank you so much for your time and for listening to this really important conversation. And as Vijay said, if you have any questions, please talk to us, feedback. We only learn, I mean, this is a journey, it's not a destination, like I said. We're constantly adapting to make this work for the next big thing, and it's just coming rapidly. So thank you so much for your attention.